Reinhard Tristan Eugen Heydrich was born on March 7, 1904, in Halle an der Saale, a town in Saxony. His father, Bruno Heydrich, was a well-known operatic tenor and the founder of the local conservatory. His mother, Elisabeth, was the daughter of a Protestant pastor. Music, discipline, and order were the cornerstones of his upbringing. Reinhard grew up surrounded by the music of Wagner and Mozart. From an early age, he demonstrated exceptional musical talent. He played the violin and piano, regularly performed at school concerts, and by the time he reached adolescence, there was talk of him becoming a professional musician. But music wasn't his only strength. He also excelled in sports. He was a skilled swimmer, runner, horseman, and above all, a fencer. He competed in tournaments, represented his school, and later the military. He was the image of the ideal German youth, at least outwardly. And yet, something didn't quite fit. Despite his apparent perfection, young Reinhard suffered from deep insecurity. At school, he was quiet, even shy. He was nicknamed the Billy Goat with a violin, supposedly due to his slender build and large nose. Rumors also circulated that he was of Jewish descent. These claims were untrue. An investigation by Himmler's apparatus later confirmed that the Heydrich family was of Aryan origin, but the trauma of these accusations stayed with him. Historians believe that this sense of a threatened identity played a key role in shaping his fanatical loyalty to the Nazi worldview. Heydrich grew up in a strict, competitive environment. The desire to prove his worth, perhaps even to take revenge, took deep root in him. And when the opportunity came, he seized it with both hands. In 1922, at the age of 18, Reinhard Heydrich joined the Reichsmarine, the German Navy. After World War I, Germany had been humiliated, and its military severely restricted by the Treaty of Versailles. Nevertheless, the Navy still offered young men prestige, order, and opportunity. Heydrich thrived in uniform. He excelled in precision, technical thinking, and flawless discipline. He climbed the ranks and served aboard a destroyer. He was soon assigned to the Reichsmarine's intelligence division, where he first encountered the methods of covert operations and information analysis. During this period, he also learned to fly, not just basic training aircraft, but more complex machines as well. Flying later became both his personal hobby and a symbol of elite status. His military career seemed promising, but then came an event that changed everything. In 1931, Heydrich became engaged to the daughter of a naval officer, but shortly afterward, he met Lina von Osten, a committed Nazi and a young woman from a Baltic noble family. He broke off the engagement and chose Lina instead. In the military, this was a scandal. He had violated the officer's code of honor. In June 1931, Reinhard Heydrich was dismissed from the Reichsmarine without the right to wear a uniform. He lost his career, his dignity, his direction. He was unemployed and deeply depressed. And it was at that moment that Lina stepped in. Lina von Osten believed in Nazism, and she also believed in her fiancé's abilities. She encouraged him to apply for a job with the SS, which at the time was still a small organization under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler, looking for someone to build their intelligence service. Heydrich showed up for the interview uninvited. He presented Himmler with a proposed structure for a future SS intelligence agency. Himmler was impressed and hired him. Thus, the Sicherheitsdienst SD was born. At first a small apparatus, Heydrich turned it into a machine for gathering information, surveillance, and control. He collected personal data on anyone who might be an enemy, real or imagined. After Hitler came to power in 1933, Heydrich's rise was meteoric. He soon became head of the Gestapo, the secret state police, which was already using torture and extrajudicial executions. In June 1934, Heydrich played a key role in the so-called Night of the Long Knives, a purge during which the leadership of the SA, including Ernst Röhm, was murdered. Heydrich and Himmler ensured that the SS took over policing functions in the Reich. From that point on, Heydrich had control over all internal security. In 1936, he merged the Gestapo and the criminal police, Kripo, into one unit, the SIPO. And in 1939, he created a massive security apparatus, the Reich Main Security Office, known as the RSHA. It was a giant bureaucracy combining secret police, criminal investigators, analysts, and administrators, all under the command of one man, Heydrich. From a former violinist and dismissed naval officer, he had become the most powerful figure in Nazi security, a young general with absolute authority and a total lack of conscience. With the outbreak of World War II, Heydrich's role shifted. He was no longer merely the head of the secret police. He became the architect of genocide. In September 1939, following the invasion of Poland, mass deportations of Jews to ghettos began. As head of the RSHA, Heydrich was responsible for organizing these actions. Under his leadership, the Einsatzgruppen were formed, mobile killing units made up of SS men, policemen, and criminal investigators. These units operated behind the front lines in Poland, the Baltics, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. Their task was to systematically murder Jews, communists, Roma, and other designated groups. Victims were executed en masse in forests, fields, and ditches. The largest massacre occurred in the ravine of Babi Yar near Kyiv. Over 33,000 people were shot there over the course of 2 days. On July 31st, 1941, Heydrich received written authorization from Hermann Göring to carry out the so-called final solution to the Jewish question. This formal document gave him a free hand to plan the systematic extermination of Europe's Jews. The culmination of this phase was the Wannsee Conference, held on January 20th, 1942, in a villa near Berlin. Heydrich chaired the meeting, which brought together 15 high-ranking officials and SS officers. In about 90 minutes, they discussed the logistics of mass murder: rail cars, transit camps, extermination centers. There were no moral debates, only cold calculations. How many? From where? When? Heydrich was the CEO of death in this machinery of murder, without emotion, without doubt. His signature confirmed the transports to death. Heydrich was not just an executor, he was a strategist, a manipulator, and a master of psychological control. In Hitler's Reich, he was referred to as the number 3 man, after Hitler and Himmler. Behind the scenes, some whispered that he might even become a future Führer. He knew how to instill fear. Even within the SS, people were afraid of him. He possessed an exceptional memory, able to recall the names of hundreds of individuals and small details from their pasts. His subordinates said that his office felt physically cold, a place of tension and dread. Although he was not officially responsible for foreign policy, he was behind several key provocative operations. The most notorious was Operation Himmler, a series of false flag attacks intended to create the illusion that Poland was attacking Germany. The most infamous of these was the so-called Gleiwitz incident, a staged attack on a German radio station on August 31st, 1939. The town of Gleiwitz, today known as Gliwice, is part of modern-day Poland. The transmission tower was seized by German operatives dressed as Poles. The attackers were identified using the bodies of prisoners dressed in Polish uniforms. These bodies were killed beforehand and left on site to give the impression of a Polish raid. The incident served as a pretext for launching the war, Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939. Heydrich personally oversaw the preparation of the entire operation. By then, it was clear. Heydrich was not just a bureaucrat. He was a cog in the war machine, a man who coldly ensured that the machinery of collective madness operated with maximum efficiency. In September 1941, Adolf Hitler sent Reinhard Heydrich to the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Officially, he was appointed acting Reich Protector. Unofficially, he was sent to crush Czech resistance. Heydrich arrived in Prague in a black limousine, elegant, confident, composed. But behind the facade of a civilized official was a man who would stop at nothing. Immediately upon his arrival, he launched widespread repression against the Czech resistance. Dozens of public figures, politicians, officers, intellectuals, were arrested and executed. This marked the beginning of the first wave of Heydrich's terror, known as the First Heydrichiada. It was a campaign of deliberate terror. Heydrich personally approved execution lists, imprisoned hundreds at Pankrak, the small fortress in Terezín, and at the Gestapo headquarters in the Petček Palace. People disappeared without a trace. At the same time, he introduced a carrot-and-stick strategy. He increased food rations for workers and introduced bonuses for higher productivity. His goal was to make Czech factories produce weapons for the Reich, without sabotage, without resistance. In matters of the Jewish question, he was equally ruthless. Under his administration, deportations of Czech Jews accelerated. He played a key role in the establishment of the so-called model ghetto in Terezín, which served as both a transit camp and a propaganda tool aimed at deceiving the international community. Terezín was meant to showcase the humane treatment of Jews. In reality, it was a waiting room for death. Of the more than 150,000 people who passed through Terezín, the majority perished in Auschwitz, Treblinka, and other extermination camps. For most Czechs, Heydrich became the face of Nazi terror. His nickname, the Butcher of Prague. Heydrich's brutality did not go unanswered. The Czechoslovak government in exile in London, in cooperation with the British Secret Service SOE Special Operations Executive, prepared Operation Anthropoid. The objective was clear: to kill Reinhard Heydrich. Two parachutists, Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš, were sent into the occupied homeland. They were trained for months in sabotage, disguise, and weapons handling. In December 1941, they parachuted into the Protectorate. After months of preparation, D-Day came on May 27, 1942. At a sharp bend in Prague, they ambushed Heydrich's car. Gabčík's submachine gun jammed, but Kubiš threw a modified anti-tank grenade. The explosion shattered the vehicle and wounded Heydrich in the back. Heydrich was taken to Nábulovce Hospital. For a few days, his condition seemed to improve. But on June 4, 1942, he suddenly died. Of sepsis, caused by fragments from the car seat stuffing that had penetrated his spleen. The death of the Butcher of Prague sent shockwaves through Berlin. Hitler was furious. Himmler demanded revenge. The Nazis unleashed a campaign of brutal reprisals. The village of Lidice was annihilated. All men were shot. Women were deported. Most of the children were murdered in gas vans at Chelmno. The same fate befell the village of Ležáky. Arrests, executions, and terror swept across the entire Protectorate. More than 1,300 people were killed. Heydrich was buried with honors in Berlin. But his death showed the world that Nazi evil could be struck down, and that the Czech people were fighting back. Reinhard Heydrich was a monster, but he was not a madman, not a raving psychopath in a straitjacket. He was an intelligent, educated, cultured man who consciously dedicated his brilliance to evil. A surprising number of doctors and lawyers were swept up by ideology, sold their souls, and served, like Heydrich, in the murderous Einsatzgruppen. Heydrich's life path is a terrifying reminder that even a gifted individual, a musician, a soldier, an organizer, can be more dangerous than any beast when conscience and empathy are lost. His death was a victory, but his actions continue to warn us. Remember his name. Not because he deserves admiration, but because we must never forget what humanity is capable of when it abandons its own humanity.